Hey everybody, I'm here with the second video. If you watched the first video, this is going to be my second video. That video is just a little, a few minute clip of a message that God wanted me to share with you guys. This one's going to be more of a sermon like last time. So again, we're going to be looking in Joshua. Usually when I start reading a new book in the Bible, in the beginning, I don't expect anything to really jump out at me. It's the beginning, the story's just starting, but this might be the first time that I started reading and immediately something jumped out at me and I wanted to share it with you guys. So it's in Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. And it says, Moses, the servant of the Lord, died. After that, the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun. Joshua was Moses' helper. The Lord said to Joshua, My servant Moses is dead. Now then, I want you. I'm going to read that again. Now then, I want you and all of these people to get ready to go across the Jordan River. I want all of you to go into the land I am about to give to the people of Israel. So the reason that stood out to me is because in the beginning, when God, mentioned the promised land, he told it to Moses. And Moses told the people of Israel, and Moses was their leader, leading them to the promised land. So when God's plan first began, Moses was the one who knew about it. He was the one who led the people to the promised land. But, they hadn't got to the promised land yet, and Moses died. So then they had to choose somebody. God chose Joshua. So why Joshua? There's a group of there's a whole group of men, and what made Joshua, what made him capable to lead this group? Like, why wasn't it somebody else? And sometimes I think we kind of wonder that, like, maybe if you are at a job, right, and you are really good at it, you are kind to the customers and you work hard, you show up on time, but maybe somebody who you think is less deserving gets a promotion. And you kind of think, well, what makes them, qualified to get that promotion when I'm, better at the job than they are. So, I want to make this point. It's God doesn't look for your abilities, but your availability. So, God gave us all of our strength. So every strength we have, God gave to us. So, nothing we are good at is a surprise to him. He knows what we're good at because he gave us those abilities, those strengths, and those talents. So God doesn't look for those because that wouldn't really be fair, because God calls who he wants to call. God uses who he wants to use. So he doesn't look, like, you may not be qualified. For me, take me for example, I'm a perfect example for this because I don't like speaking in front of people. Like, when I went to public school, whenever I had to give a presentation, my face turns all red and I can't do it very well. I don't like standing up in front of people and talking, but God has called me to be a youth pastor. So, you might wonder, and maybe you've asked this to yourself, I don't know, maybe you've asked, well, what makes me qualified? And, I'm not qualified, I'm not, but God equips those that he's called. So, he is giving me the strength and the wisdom and the bravery to do what he's called me to do, because on my own, I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't even be able to make these videos, but because I am relying on God's strength, he is equipping me with everything that I need to be successful in what I do and what he's called me to do. So it's not about your abilities, it's about your availability. Are you available to do what God has called you to do? Because there's one thing that God can't do, and you're like, Keenan, what do you mean? I thought God could do everything. There's one thing he can't, and that's move in a closed heart. And the reason why is because he gives us free will. He doesn't force us to believe in him. He doesn't force himself on us. He allows us to, determine if we believe in him or not. And so that's why if we don't believe in him and we kind of close our lives off away from him, we close our hearts to him, he can't move in our hearts because we won't let him. So if we say yes to when God calls us, if we say yes and we are available, God will equip us. You don't have to worry about being qualified for whatever, God's called you to do. You just have to be faithful. You have to lean on him and just trust that he will give you the strength, the abilities, and the tools to do what he's called you to do. I'm going to go to verse 5, verse 5 real quick. Chapter 1, verse 5 of Joshua. It says, Joshua, no one will be able to stand up against you as long as you live. I will be with you, just as I was with Moses. I will never leave you. I will never desert you. God says that quite often throughout the Bible, something along the lines of, I will never leave you, I will never desert you, I will always be with you. God makes that promise quite often throughout the Bible. I'm going to jump over to Matthew real quick. Matthew chapter 18, verses 12 through 14. And it says, what do you think? Suppose a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away. Won't he leave the 99 sheep on the hills? Won't he go and look for the one that wandered off? What I'm about to tell you is true. If he finds that sheep, he is happier about the one than about the 99 that didn't wander off. It is the same with your Father in heaven. He does not want any of these little ones to be lost. So the reason I wanted to jump over to that real quick was because, like it ended saying, that parable of the lost sheep, that's a demonstration of us and God. If you don't know God, he is still with you. He doesn't, just because you don't believe in him, doesn't mean he's not right behind you, following you, watching over you. He wants the best for you. He wants you to know him, know his peace, know his love. He wants you to be set free from whatever you're dealing with right now. But you have to, come to know him, and he's always knocking on the door of our hearts, wanting in. But like I said earlier, he can do anything except moved in a closed heart. But he will not stop chasing you down. And I know that kind of sounds bad, like he's a stalker, but he just loves you. That's how much he loves you, that he won't stop. He'll do anything to get to you, to save you, to see you come to know him. He will do anything he can to just see you come home to him. So now I want to jump over to verse 9. And it says, here is what I am commanding you to do. Be strong and brave. Do not be terrified. Do not lose hope. I am the Lord your God. I will be with you everywhere you go. So God also tells us to do that multiple times throughout the Bible, to be brave, do not be afraid. So I don't remember the exact definition of fear, but it basically says that the belief that something or someone is a potential threat. And that word belief in there is kind of crazy, because if you're afraid, you are choosing to believe that something is a potential threat. So you don't even know that it is. You are just choosing to believe it, instead of believing that God will protect you. He will bring you out of the storm. You are choosing to be afraid rather than rest in the promises of God that he will take care of you and that he will get you through whatever you're going through. And that just kind of jumped out to me one day, and it's crazy because fear is always around, and how many times are we afraid, and then how many times does God in the Bible tell us not to be afraid? It's this ongoing battle all the time, of fear. It's just always around, and it's always trying to creep into our lives, but we have to push back. We have to fight it by choosing to believe in God and his peace rather than choosing to believe in the fear. So it's this ongoing battle that you have to choose what you want to believe in. It's your choice. So that just kind of stuck out to me. So I'm going to read chapter 2 now. Moved on to chapter 2 finally. So it says, Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 spies from Shittim. He sent them in secret. He said to them, Go look the land over. Most of all, check out Jericho. So they went to Jericho. They stayed at the house of a prostitute. Her name was Rahab. The king of Jericho was told, Look, some of the people of Israel have come here tonight. They've come to check out the land. So the king sent a message to Rahab. It said, Bring out the men who came into your house. They've come to check out the whole land. But the woman had hidden the 2 men. She said, It's true that the men came here, but I didn't know where they had come from. So what's crazy about that is that Rahab, as it said, was a prostitute. And, you know, these men, these 2 spies, they came and stayed in her house for a little while. But then the king of Jericho found out and wanted them to be found. So they went to Rahab's house, but Rahab hid them and told the king that, you know, she didn't know where they went, that they had stopped by, but then she didn't know where they went, and she hid the men. So that's the crazy part, is because Rahab was a prostitute and knew how to hide men. This is a weird thing to talk about, but the message here is awesome. So, like I said, Rahab knew how to hide men. She was good at it, and, you know, this time it worked for God's purpose. You know, he's on the spies teams. This is, you know, in the book of Joshua. Joshua is trying to take over all these lands that God has promised him. So, God used this prostitute to accomplish his purpose. And that's the crazy part right there. Because God will use even the things you are embarrassed by and try to hide from others to accomplish his purpose, and sometimes to even take you to your destiny. And that is just crazy because, I mean, everybody has secrets. And, you know, some of them we don't mind sharing, some of them we keep hidden all our lives. So, but the thing is, God always knows. God knows every secret you have. And even if you don't tell people, he knows, and he will use every part of you, every bit of you, flaw, strength, to accomplish his purpose and to carry you to your destiny. And that just stood out to me because, I mean, a prostitute, I mean, that's terrible. That's just terrible. Let's be honest here, that's terrible. But God still used her to bring his plan out, to accomplish his plan. So, despite, you know, your past, despite whatever you're doing right now, you know, whatever sin you're struggling with, as long as you seek the face of God, as long as you are trying your best every day, God will use your weaknesses, use your struggles, use your addictions. He will somehow find a way to use them for your good and to accomplish and bring out his plan. So I want you guys to think about that next time you're kind of, you know, you're struggling and you kind of wonder, you know, like, God, why am I still struggling with this? God has a reason. If he wanted to get rid of your addiction or your struggle or whatever, he would do it. But I believe that if you still struggle and you're trying, let me say that real quick, because, you know, if you just are doing it just because you're forgiven, you know, that's different. But if you're still struggling but you're trying to get better, then I believe that God will use that in a way, somewhere down the road. So I just want you to think about that next time. You know, you're kind of frustrated because of what you're struggling with. So I just kind of want you to think about that. So, and my next point is I want to ask you guys a question. What is our mission? So in the book of Joshua, you know, Joshua's mission, the people of Israel, their mission was to take over all these lands and to reach the promised land that God, you know, has promised them. So, what is our mission? Because I'm going to take a leap here and say that most of us are not trying to take over cities. But so what is our mission in today? What is our mission? And that is to reach the lost. Our mission today is to reach the lost. So how do we do that? How do we reach the lost? What are some things we can do to accomplish what God has called us to do? And when I say reach the lost, you don't have to be called into ministry to do it. Because I think so many people kind of think that, they kind of think that, well, I'm not called into ministry, so I don't have to really do anything. Maybe be nice to people, but I don't have to tell people about God because that's a pastor's job. And, you're right, it is a pastor's job, but that's because it's everybody's job. God, like, maybe you're called to be a construction worker. I mean, whatever you're called to do, you always have access to the Bible. You always have access to God. Therefore, you can always share the gospel to others. Always. So that's our mission. But so many of us just kind of think that just because we're not in ministry, we think that means we can just not do anything. But everybody has the same mission overall. We may have different careers. Like, I want to be a youth pastor. Some of you may want to be a doctor, nurse, physical therapist, an athlete. Whatever you are called to do, that's great. God gave you those strengths and those abilities for a reason. He needs you there. But while you're there, you can also share the gospel. You can share the gospel, the word of God, in your work, in your schools. And that's another thing too, because a lot of people my age and people younger than me, they think they're too young to make a change, make an impact, but you're not. God can use anybody if you are just willing. Like I said, if you are available, if you are willing to say yes, God will use you. I promise, God will use you. You are never too young, you are never too old to do what God has called you to do. As long as there is breath still in your body, you have more to do. You have more assignments to accomplish. Until you die, you've got more to do. So keep running. Don't stop. Don't slow down. When you die, you've accomplished everything that God needed you to do. And then it's time for the next generation, just like Joshua took over for Moses. Moses had a big part in these people's lives and in the getting to the promised land, but it wasn't finished by him. It was finished by Joshua. So, you may make a huge impact, but it may not be over yet. The next person after you, your kids maybe, will carry on what you did. So I just want to encourage you guys to never stop running. Never believe that you're too young. Never believe that you're too old to do what God has called you to do. Always be ready. Always be alert to say and be ready to say yes to what God has called you to do. Have an open heart and allow God to move in there. Because like I said, God can't move if your heart's closed to Him. So open your heart to Him. Allow Him to speak into your heart and in your life. Let Him show you what He wants you to do, because His plan will always lead to success. His plan leads to life. And, if we go off on our own, we're not going to have, as much peace, as much joy as we would if we followed God's plan. I promise you, in the end, God's plan's best. He knows what's best for you. He laid out the foundation of your life. That's another thing. Your life has already been created. It's already been laid out. All these bad things, they can't stop you from what God has called you to do, what God has equipped you to do, because He's already made it good. He's already made you successful if you are willing to say yes, if you are available to do what He's called you to do. So, there's no reason to stress about it or to think that you're not qualified or equipped. God has given you everything you need. Everything you need. You have been equipped. God has provided for you. All you need to do is be available be alert and say yes. So I just encourage you guys today to don't stress, don't think about it too much. When God calls you to action, I want you guys to don't be afraid. As he told Joshua, don't be afraid, for I am with you. God is with you every step of the way. He's going to carry you through the storms. He's going to give you strength through the storms. He's going to equip you with everything you need to get through the hard times and to reach the fullness of your destiny. Keep running this race, guys. Don't stop. Don't slow down. Always say yes. Thank you, guys. I love you.